Hello, writers and friends. Welcome to Coffee with Jude. Today we're going to talk about the tools that you can use to write your book. Microsoft Word and Scrivener are two of the most popular programs. If you're writing on a computer, they are invaluable. So we'll talk about the differences between the two of them. This week we'll talk about Microsoft Word, and then next week I'll talk about Scrivener. When I started writing my book, I had a really hard time deciding if I should write it by hand or on the computer. I loved the feel of writing by hand. It just seemed like I was connected more to my soul than when I was using the computer. So I went back and forth, but then when I wanted to edit, it was just impossible. I couldn't cross out things, and there wasn't room to redo a whole sentence or take stuff out. I finally figured out how to use the computer well enough so that I felt like I was speaking from my soul, even though I was on the computer. I guess it was just the process of getting really good at the touch typing and being fast, keeping up with my thoughts on the computer. So let's take a look at this first installment about writing with Microsoft Word. Okay. Coffee with Jude. So about 40 years ago, I got my first computer. It was about this big. I mean, that's the width of it. And it came with Word Perfect. And I sat down and started typing, and I watched the screen, and when I got to the end of the line, I hit the return key because I figured, well, that's the same as the carriage return on a typewriter. And so I typed a whole bunch of stuff, and then I printed it out, and it was skillywampus. The side of it was all jagged. The margins were all way off. And I couldn't figure out how come what was on the screen wasn't the same as what I printed. And it took me the longest time, and I finally figured out that you don't hit return. When you get to the end of the line, you just let it wrap around and it'll do its own thing. And so that was a frustrating thing. Almost made me want to quit working on a computer, but I got it figured out. So then when I decided I wanted to write, seriously, wanted to write a book, I started out writing with pen and paper because it seemed so much more organic and easier to let the words flow when I was writing with paper. I had a fountain pen that I just loved. So it seemed like I could just keep up with my thoughts at a perfect rate when I was writing by hand. Then when I switched to using the computer, it felt so clunky. But what I loved about the computer was that it was so easy to edit things and easy to retrieve files and keep them organized into folders. And so I kind of just went back and forth the first year with writing by hand and then writing with the computer. And finally, I chose the computer when my typing skills got fast enough that I could keep up with my thoughts. And now, if I try to write by hand, I feel just like I did when I started with the computer. I cannot keep up with my thoughts. It's really uncomfortable. There are two programs that are most widely used by writers for compiling a book, and those are Microsoft Word and Scrivener. I started using Microsoft Word on my first book, my first memoir, Sunlight on My Shadow, and it worked great because I was familiar with it. But after the book got long, it was kind of unwieldy and hard to get around and figure out where I was and keep track of what I'd said and what I hadn't said. So I would put notes at the end and like what I wanted to put in chapter 5 and things to remind me. But it was hard to organize all that stuff. But then I found the navigation pane and how to use that. And that was super helpful because then I could organize my manuscript into chapters and get to each chapter and just click on it and get to it. And I'll show you how that works. Go to the View tab and then select Navigation Pane. And then you can select the list. These are all the chapters, so you can click on any chapter and get to it. This works really well to organize your document. The disadvantage of using Word is that you can't click on this chapter 6 and slide it up to chapter 2 if you wanted to rearrange the whole chunk of material. You would have to copy it and paste it in a new area. That's the main difference between Word and Scrivener, which is what I love about Scrivener. Well, let's start a new document. File, new document, and I've already got my navigation pane up. So if I have a chapter, I'm going to call it Under the Moon. Then I highlight it and I select up here in the Styles pane a heading. So to get to your Styles pane, you're going to have to go to the Home tab. And it should be here. This is the default Styles pane. So you see, once I do that, it appears right here. Under the Moon. If I want to type some content, go back to this normal type and I would say I went a dive in the water. Okay, so I'm getting ready to do a new chapter, so I'm going to call this one Swimming with the Dolphins. Then you add your content. Another feature of Microsoft Word that is widely used is the track changes. If you give your book to an editor, they can mark changes that they suggest in your book, and then on this column on the side, it will have comments, and you can either accept or reject that change that was suggested. So let me show you how track changes work. Here's a sample of my manuscript that I got back that had track changes in it. And you can see on the right are the suggestions. Then you just right click and you can accept or reject what your editor says. To get to track changes, you want to go to the Review tab and then you click Track Changes On. And then you can accept or reject what your editor has put in there. So that's track changes in Microsoft Word.